Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Yaser Rayyan. I'm the Dean of the Medical School at the University of Jordan. Good evening, esteemed colleagues, distinguished speakers, and dedicated participants from across the globe. It is with great pleasure and profound honor that I welcome you to our esteemed online research workshop series, an innovative collaboration between the Global Health Catalyst and the University of Jordan School of Medicine. This series remarks a significant milestone in our shared journey towards enhancing global health through rigorous research and scholarly inquiry. I'm sorry, we are still facing some technical difficulties here. To our participants, we are joined today with an array of esteemed academics and professionals from some of the world experts, from some of the world's esteemed programs, including Johns Hopkins University, Harvard University, University of Pennsylvania, Oxford University, and many others. I think also University of Virginia as well. Your presence and willingness to share your expertise not only enrich this event, but also enhance our collective efforts to improve healthcare outcome worldwide. To our participants, medical and health professionals, medical and graduate students, and international healthcare workers, your commitment to expanding your knowledge and skills is commendable. This workshop series is designed to provide you with access to cutting-edge research, methodologies, and the invaluable experience of our speakers. You are the driving force that will translate today's knowledge into tomorrow's innovation in healthcare. In today's rapidly evolving medical landscape, the importance of research cannot be overstated. With advancement in artificial intelligence and other technologies reshaping our capabilities, it is imperative that we stay at the forefront of these changes, ensuring they are leveraged for the greater good. This workshop will cover essential topics from the fundamentals of research design to methodology, addressing quantitative and qualitative tools, to the intricacies of data analysis and data collection tools, drafting and presenting research findings, and finally, publishing research papers. Let us take this opportunity to learn from each other, to network, and to build lasting collaborations that transcend geographical and disciplinary boundaries. Your active participation in this series will not only enhance your professional skills, but also contribute to the broader scope of global health improvement. I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to the organizers and the sponsors of this event, especially Professor Ngwa, the director of the Global Health Catalyst, dedicated to catalyzing high-impact collaborations to eliminate cancer health disparities in the United States and globally. Dr. Ngwa is the PI for the biomaterial drones and radioimmunotherapy lab at Johns Hopkins Medicine, whose vision and dedication have made this workshop possible. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to engaging with each of you and to the exciting outcomes that your work will surely bring about. Let's make this workshop a cornerstone for future research and collaboration. I'm going to give you a short and quick overview of the University of Jordan and the School of Medicine. The University of Jordan is the largest, most prestigious and oldest institution of higher education in Jordan. It was founded in 1962 by royal decree by His Majesty the late King Hussein. UJ has evolved into a comprehensive university with a second branch in the port city of Aqaba. The university is organized across 20 faculties and over 95 departments. UJ has achieved international accreditation for their medicine, rehabilitation, pharmacy, nursing, and dentistry programs, among others. The number of students at the University of Jordan is about 50,000 students. 6,000 are international or foreign students. The faculty is around 1,500 full faculty members. 2% of these are non-Jordanians. The University of Jordan entered the 500 team through the QS ranking system over the past 2 years. And it's been ranked across other ranking systems, as you can see here. And this April, the university ranking by subject, we have 18 programs who are ranked. If you look here at the first program among the first 50 programs of the world, the University of the College of Nursing, among the top 150 to 200 is the Faculty of Pharmacy, and the School of Medicine is among the 250 to 300 on the QS ranking. The School of Medicine was established in 1971, and the School of Medicine received the first group of students, which were 42 students. The curriculum at that time was pre-medicine for 2 years, pre-clinical for 2 years, and clinical for 3 years. In 1973, the Greater Amman Hospital, under the ownership of the University of Jordan, has been officially named Jordan University Hospital. This is a tertiary care hospital of around 700 beds. That's within the bridge across walking distance from the School of Medicine. And this is the principal institution for the training of our medical students. In 1978, the graduation of the first class following an evaluation exam conducted by the University of Birmingham, and subsequently our school has earned accreditation. Over the past 4 decades, the school has grown in staff and capacity, became one of the leading medical schools in the region, gained excellent reputation worldwide, and every year hundreds of our medical doctors graduate. Our vision is to be an international center of academic excellence, contributing to the development of health science and distinguishing itself on the basis of quality of both its graduates and research, and the relevance of its training programs to national and global needs. And our mission is to provide society with qualified physicians capable of delivering quality healthcare services nationally, regionally, and internationally, of pursuing specialized higher studies, of engaging in scientific research, and of interacting with the world medical community. The School of Medicine is the first school in Jordan. Currently, we do have 6 government-based schools and 2 private medical schools. We have 5 basic sciences departments. We have 7 clinical departments. We have 13 academic training centers, with the Jordan University Hospital as its primary, as its principal center. Just make sure that, yes. We have 19 graduate medical education academic programs and 5 master programs. We have 207 full academic staff members, and we do have 219 clinical instructors. And currently, I'm sorry for the typo here, we currently have 5,092 medical students. 1/3 of these are international students. Our Faculty of Medicine has been accredited by the WFME since 2016. And this year, our Faculty of Medicine ranked 251 according to the QS World University ranking by subject. And this is a tremendous improvement over the past 2 years. We've been over the past 5 years in the 400 category, but over the past 2 years, we moved 150 points, and currently we are in the rank of 250 to 300. The output of the publications have been tremendously increased over the years. Over the past 3 years, we have tripled the number of publications in terms of quantity as well as quality. And the University of Jordan do have 27 distinguished researchers. Of those, 6 are from the School of Medicine, who were among the top 2% in the world in Stanford ranking of 2023. We established our scientific research office in 2019 to help and guide our medical students in their graduation projects. And we do conduct the Student Scientific Research Day every year, where our graduating students, they present their graduation projects. This year, around 200 projects are going to be presented. We have also probably around 40 oral presentations, and amply of these posters are going to be published. We do have quite a few agreements with different parts of the world, universities, as well as institutions. The University of Jordan and the Global Health Catalyst collaboration we are very excited to engage in this high-impact international collaboration to advance healthcare and address health disparities around the globe. So the program today will spread over 3 days. We will start with multiple subjects, cutting-edge subjects in research. We will start with research design. Then we will go over methodologies, including quantitative and qualitative methodologies. Then we have a course on basic statistics. Sorry for the interruption. The workshop will start with research design. We will go over quantitative and qualitative methods, basic statistics, data collection and analysis, presenting research, publishing. I will conclude with the fact that here in Jordan, we do face too many challenges in medical research, mostly related to lack of funding, infrastructure deficiencies, skilled personnel shortage, regulatory and ethical issues, healthcare priorities, and collaboration difficulties. With that, I would like to thank you all for being here with us. And I'm confident that each presentation will offer an insightful contributions to our fields and foster lively discussions. Let's make the most of this opportunity to learn from one another and hopefully leave with new perspectives and ideas. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to a fruitful and enjoyable session. Moreover, I must acknowledge the hard work and commitment of Dr. Laila Tutunji, Dr. Qais Belbesi, Dr. Fida Dikrallah, and Jamil Zawahir from the Jordan part, and from the Jordan side, and Dr. Salam Abbedat, Dr. Fatoumata Bari with the Global Health Catalyst team, whose efforts behind the scenes have been instrumental in bringing this event to fruition. Thank you very much.
Dear everyone, we welcome now Dr. Wilfred Ngwa, our next presenter. Welcome, Dr. Will.
All right. Thank you so much, Laila. And thank you so much, Dean Yaser, for that wonderful welcome. I just want to talk a little bit about, give some background on the Global Health Catalyst, and also add my warm welcome to this wonderful session for this workshop. So just to give you some background about the Global Health Catalyst. So in terms of the history, this is really a program that has started with funding from the Harvard Radcliffe Institute back in 2015. And this has really grown to other, to involve other world-leading universities. And it's really wonderful, just listening to Dr. Yaser's presentation about, how the University of Jordan has really risen, it's one of the best universities in Jordan. So we cannot be more proud to be able to collaborate on this workshop. The key areas that the Global Health Catalyst works in catalyzing collaborations, there are really 4 core areas. Care, around looking at how you can collaborate across the world to address disparities in accessing healthcare. A big focus nowadays is looking at artificial intelligence, but there are other areas of telehealth that from prevention through diagnosis, through treatment, and palliative care that we collaborate around. A very important aspect of the work of the Global Health Catalyst is around outreach. We have funding from the United States to have these yearly events that we do to catalyze collaboration. So we bring people together to talk, share ideas, educate, and then collaborate. And this can be from, trainees to presidents to, at all range, because global health happens to be one of those fields that's cross-disciplinary. And so everyone can contribute. And so today, obviously in this audience, there are many of you who would probably be involved at some point beyond just your clinic or healthcare institution with global health. In research, which is really the important focus of this workshop, we really facilitate a lot of research, around implementation research. We do multi-country, multi-center clinical trials, as an example. And then around education, we have a global oncology university platform, which is supporting this workshop today towards really making sure that, because capacity building is the most important aspect when we think about healthcare. Just highlight a couple of things in terms of collaboration. So we work with, in the past years, working with the White House, being able to significantly, one of the examples of collaborations around the cancer moonshot, being able to extend that globally. A lot of the work has been with Africa. So now we are really looking and excited to be able to do stuff in other parts of the world, including with Jordan. So in this picture, this is Dr. Jill Biden, the two African First Ladies, really looking at the fact that collaborations, and I kind of show this because collaboration is really critical, in being able to address, not only in research, but also address healthcare and global health disparities. So one of the collaborative initiatives that we have has been around the Global Oncology University platform, which is really focused on, has a model that is really focused on capacity building across the world. We do conduct online didactic course components. We plan to integrate virtual reality as the technology becomes more available, so VR. But then we partner with different sites across the world where you can have the practical training in the clinic or where you want to be. And so far, there's been really tremendous impact around the world with using this model of education. And obviously this workshop is one of those aspects where we're going to have the virtual part, but you're also on the ground. And we hope that, like Dean Yaser mentioned, we actually are going to have a follow-up workshop around grant writings, so we can think about potential areas to drive research collaborations that are also practical in your local setting. So, another example just to end is really, with the emergence of ChatGPT and AI, there's become a really tremendous way, that you could extend global health. And so one of the initiatives that we have coming or currently going on is this building a comprehensive cancer center in the cloud. You could imagine that it's the same like taking your hospital and putting in the cloud where people, doesn't matter where they are, can have access to healthcare. So we really look forward. This has really been an initiative that is growing, across Africa, but we think in collaboration with the United States. But I think, there's opportunity to also extend that, to Jordan. And then finally, like I mentioned, we do have these yearly outreach events that we catalyze collaborations in terms of a conference in the US. And we're so honored last year when we had the Jordanian team visit, and that really set up a good opportunity for these collaborations that we have today. So to end, I just want to end with this quote by Albert Einstein, who is recognized as the greatest scientist of the 20th century. And he basically said, imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited, but imagination encircles the world. And what he really means by this, I think, is that, and I think that's really critical as we go into this research workshop series, is that really research begins with your imagination, curiosity, and then you develop a hypothesis from that, which you are going to investigate. And I think that this is a really good opportunity to kind of good message for all of us as we participate in this workshop, that don't be limited by your imagination. As you walk through these projects or research, the challenge will be for you to come up with a project idea, imagine a project that you may want to do, and then think about, as you go and learn through these contents of the workshop, think about how you can apply that to be able to make that research project a reality. Like I mentioned, we'll have another opportunity for the workshop on grant writing, so it maybe give opportunities to address one of the challenges that Dean Yaser mentioned on funding. But if you can imagine your project, then that you have to start from there before we can even think about how you resource that. So just ending by saying that collaborations is critical. There is a saying from Africa that if you want to go far, you have to go together. So it's really important that as you think about research today, what do you imagine and what do you want to do? Also think about how you can collaborate with other people. Thank you so much for your attention, and I really wish you all a wonderful workshop.
Hello, everyone. We are very, very excited to be part of this Global Health Catalyst collaboration with the University of Jordan and the Global Health Catalyst program. This is our first series of online workshops dedicated to clinical research. And the first lecture is about an introduction to clinical research. My name is Dr. Laila Tutunji. I am the Jordan Catalyst of the Global Health Catalyst Program and the Technical Director of the Office of Medical Research. We welcome our esteemed speakers, our esteemed guests, our esteemed participants. We welcome our two speakers of the day, Professor Dr. Paul Nguyen, who will be giving the keynote address about research impact on advancing healthcare, and Professor Yasmin Karim Saida from Harvard University, who will present the first lecture, which is the fundamentals of research design. For this course, for assessment and certification, the participants are required to attend a minimum of 70% of lectures, and participants will be requested to undertake a pre-test and a post-test. At the beginning of this presentation, we shared a QR code, and there was a link that was emailed to all participants to take the pre-test. And then towards the end of the course, there is a post-test. Successful participants will receive a certificate of completion and will be recognized at the 2024 Global Health Catalyst Summit in Washington, D.C., inshallah, in June 2024. So I'm gonna take us all through an overview of today and the next 2 days. Today, the session will continue for the next 3 hours with our keynote address and the first lecture. Tomorrow is Friday, and the lectures will start at 3 p.m. Jordan time. we will go through the quantitative methods in research by Prof. Marie Diener West, who is the Johns Hopkins University Chair of Masters of Public Health program there. This will be followed by an editorial address by the Nature Journal editor, Dr. Ming Yang, from the Springer Nature Group. Further lectures will include qualitative methods in research by Dr. Will Ngwa, and the sessions will end with an introduction to literature review by Professor Krishni from the University of Virginia. That will be tomorrow. So the third day, which is Saturday, the lectures will start at 2:30 p.m. Jordan time. We will start with basic statistics. So it's all about data and publications, the third day. So basic statistics to be followed by examples of data collection and data collection tools by Prof. Chen Hu from Johns Hopkins University. And this will be followed by qualitative data analysis and the DDoS data collection tool, which will be given by Dr. Talata Sawadugo Lewis from Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. And then we have drafting and presenting research findings by Prof. Stephen Avery, who is also a founding member of the Global Health Catalyst Summits and professor of radiation oncology at the University of Pennsylvania. Okay, so day 3 will end with a very important lecture, which is publishing research papers. It is a very important lecture to be given by Professor David Kerr from Oxford University. Professor David Kerr is a world expert in colorectal cancer. He is the professor of cancer medicine and former fellow of Corpus Christi College at Oxford. And he's the Oxford president-elect for the European Society for Medical Oncology and a distinguished Harvard Global Health Catalyst awardee.
All right, so I actually would like to introduce my friend Paul. So Paul is, really world-renowned in the work that he does. He's currently the vice chair for clinical research and the Baldwin Politi Family Distinguished Chair in Oncology at Harvard Medical School. He has actually done a lot of work internationally recognized in his work in prostate cancer, clinical care, and research. He has published over 350 original research studies. I'm sure that over the past years, this must be getting more over near to 400, and has national leadership in so many different committees, including the National Cancer Institute's GU Steering Committee. He chairs, is the chair of the ARS and ACR Appropriateness Criteria Committee for Prostate Cancer, and chair of the ASTRO Annual Refresher Course. He is also, which is really relevant to the research workshop, is really a principal investigator of multi-center randomized clinical trials that are really leading, shaping the field in prostate cancer. He's also co-chair of the International Randomized Yaser trial. His research is supported by funding from the National Institute of Health of the United States. And he currently serves as the director in the Dana-Farber and Brigham and Women's Hospital Cancer Center in Genitourinary Clinical Center, director for radiation oncology. He's also the vice chair for the clinical research in the department, and obviously, as we mentioned, the professor at Harvard Medical School. He has received his AB from Harvard College, and MD from Harvard Medical School, MBA from MIT, and completed his residency at Harvard. So all stellar credentials and very prestigious institutions. So we are very honored to have Professor Paul Nguyen to give the keynote lecture today. You're welcome, Paul.
Oh, thank you so much, Will. I really appreciate it. And I'm so grateful for this honor to be here today, to be speaking with all these wonderful colleagues from Jordan and then interested folks from Johns Hopkins and others from around the world. So really appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to be here. I think for this talk, I wanted to make it quite personal, and talk about some of the impact of research on my own life and how research can change a life. And I want to give you a behind the scenes look at how some of this research happened, because from the outside, everything looks very clean and easy. You go to these schools and then you do your research and everything is easy, but there is a lot that goes into it, and that a lot of serendipity, a lot of good fortune, a lot of things that go right, a lot of things that go wrong. And so I just wanted to share this with you and give you an insight into this as you're thinking about embarking on your own research career. So I titled my talk Behind the Scenes, Learning from Mentors, Mentees, and Friends to do what I do, which is personalized therapy in high-risk prostate cancer. I really, again, want to thank Will and the organizers for allowing me to speak today to you. And I was trying to fix my photo because I don't know what happened. PowerPoint totally made it look funny, but we love Jordan. My family and I visited Jordan in 2018. Of course, here's the obligatory photo in front of Petra, but we absolutely loved it, and love your beautiful country very much, and hope to come back in person again soon. And I will say that the University of Jordan gave us at Harvard one of our greatest gifts, and this is Dr. Lubna Hamoudeh, who she's Jordanian. She went to medical school in Jordan, did her internship at your institution, the University of Jordan, and then eventually came to us at Harvard and did her fellowship with us for, I think it was 4 years as a fellow in radiation oncology at Harvard Medical School, and it was just absolutely outstanding. This is us at the Harvard Club in 2022, shortly before she graduated, and I was the interim fellowship director. And now she's a faculty member at the Oregon Health Sciences University, and we're so proud of her. And so this is to say there are wonderful connections that we have at Harvard to Jordan through Lubna that we're incredibly grateful for. And I'm incredibly grateful as well for the gift that is Professor Will Ngwa. He came to us from MD Anderson, which you may know is ranked as the top cancer center in the US, and we were able to recruit him away to Harvard, which I was very excited about. And sometimes he calls me a mentor, but really he's been my mentor, showing me the way and leading this incredible work in global oncology that he has just transformed the world in many ways with his leadership at the Lancet, and now being on President Biden's team. Just incredible. And the only thing that makes me sad about Will is that Johns Hopkins was able to recruit him away from us. But I'm so glad to still have Will as a close friend and daily collaborator. So my disclosures, these are the places that I've consulted for, and these are the companies that I receive research funding for. But my talk will be based on the evidence and the data, and not, not biased. So, like I said, from the outside, everything makes sense. Everything is linear about a research career. You're going to hear stories about all these researchers, and everything looks like it was so easy for them. But the truth is that behind the curtain, there's so much serendipity and chaos. And I want you to remember that as you pursue your own research careers. So my own family is from Vietnam. I have an American accent, but my heritage is Vietnamese. And this is a picture of my mother. She's the third here. She's the middle child of the family. She was one of 8. This is her father and her mother, and this is their village in Vietnam. And this is her younger sister. So my mother and her younger sister. My mother here, I think, was 11. Her younger sister was 8. And unfortunately, it was right around this time when they were 11 and 8. This was right in the middle of the Vietnam War. And the two of them were walking along, and her younger sister accidentally tripped a landmine that had been planted. The landmine exploded, and somehow it entirely missed the younger sister, but it hit my mother, and it blew up her intestines. She lost half of her intestines right there and lay there dying on the field. But luckily, her elder brother was in the South Vietnamese army and was friends with a member of the U.S. Army. called his friends in the US Army, who brought over a US Army medevac that pulled her out of there and saved her life. She wound up in the hospital for about a year with extensive reconstructive surgeries and rehabilitation. But she was able to survive that, which was a miracle, and then went on to, at the end of high school, she tried to escape the Vietnam, the whole conflict in the Vietnam War and the Communist Front. And she jumped into a fishing boat. And into that fishing boat, which she used to escape, my father, the person who would become my father, also jumped into that same boat at the same time. They didn't know each other then. And they floated along for 2 days. They got lucky. They didn't get picked up by pirates. They didn't get found by the communists. They didn't drown. They ran into a US Marine ship. And at the time, the policy of the US was that anybody who was escaping from Vietnam, if they could get to a US ship, they would be allowed entry into America. So they were taken to Guam Island. And eventually they went from Guam Island. They were taken to Camp Pendleton, which is a US naval camp in California. And my mother was sponsored by the Catholic Church and went to Queens, New York. So I actually grew up with a Queens accent, a New York accent, which I have slowly washed away after being at Harvard for 30 years. But my wife still makes fun of me for having a New York accent. But my mother was here in New York. My father eventually followed her out. And then pretty much 9 months and 1 day later, I was born. And so this is me as a baby in New York. And I grew up with a very normal life in New York in the 1970s, except that my mother liked to dress me in bow ties and lederhosen. And I thought this was normal at the time. I thought this was just what people do. But obviously nobody dressed this way in New York. But it has affected my style of clothes since then. I grew up in a class in New York that was very integrated, and actually there was nobody who looked like me. If you look around my high school, my elementary school classmates, I think you can find me almost immediately. It was a majority Black population, and there were some Italian Americans who were Caucasian. And I felt very fortunate because even though nobody looked like me, and there I am, my friends were incredibly welcoming. The Black families would welcome me into their homes, invite me to their birthday parties. The Italian families would welcome me to their parties and birthdays, and really made me feel like a part of the family, which was so meaningful to me. And now that, I remember acutely what it was like to not look like anybody else, but then be welcomed. And so throughout my research career, as I've become more and more, as I've moved into more positions of influence and power, I've always remembered that. And it's always been very important to me and meaningful for me that everybody feels included, that if you don't look like other people, that you still feel extremely welcome and extremely included and part of the team. Because I once didn't look like anybody else and was included and made part of the team. So my mother was, she was an immigrant, but she was a big dreamer. And she had big hopes. And I think that helped me a lot in terms of my own life. I remember the family that had taken her in. One day, the host family's brother was visiting and took one look at me and said, "Oh, he could grow up to be a really good cook." Because that was the job for Asians at the time in America. You worked in a Chinese food restaurant, or you were, you did that kind of stuff. That was like, Asians were the people that worked in Chinese food restaurants. So she said, "Oh, he could be a great cook when he grows up." And my mother, she got so mad, and she looked at him with she was polite, but she looked at him with her chest puffed out and said, "No, my son could be a great president." And that's just the kind of person that she was, and the kind of hope that she instilled on us. And actually, it was very inspirational for me as a 12-year-old in growing up in New York. There was this governor who was running for president. He ran against George Bush, the senior George Bush, and actually he lost, but he was the nominee for president on the Democratic side. George Bush was the nominee on the Republican side. And this is influential. I remember I was sitting there because the governor, his name is Michael Dukakis, and he's Greek, and he's the son of immigrants. And his main campaign message was, in America, even the son of immigrants can become president. And so this was very important to me. It was very transformative because I said, wow, you know, if even the son of immigrants can become president, then, you know, maybe I can have a future as well. And so that was a very important memory in my life. I lived a humble life growing up. My father sold, you know, they were immigrants. My father sold luggage door to door. So my father sold Lark luggage. This is very ugly luggage. This is not high fashion luggage. And you can imagine he was trying to sell it door to door in the New York, New Jersey area. This was very difficult. Imagine somebody knocking on your door, doesn't speak your language. They're trying to sell you a piece of luggage that's ugly. And this didn't go well, to say the least. But my mother did what a lot of immigrants do, and they opened small businesses. So she ran a dry cleaning store, and I would work in that dry cleaners, and I would help to prepare the hangers for the customers every day. And, you know, it was hot and stinky. I eventually went to graduated high school. This is me at my high school graduation. This is my sister, who has, you know, this skirt with a very funny color and really matches my own fashion sense. I was very fortunate to get into Harvard. My parents were very proud and excited about that. You know, and I think that they liked the whole immigrant refugee story. I was a philosophy major. I never thought that I'd be good at science, and so I majored in philosophy. I liked it. It was something my father had studied, but I did always hope that I could go into medicine. My first job was actually a management consultant at the Boston Consulting Group. And this was because actually my whole life I had wanted to be a doctor. And I was afraid at the end of college. I thought, oh, did I really always want to be a doctor, or is it just my parents wanted me to be a doctor? So I decided to leave and work in business for a while. And I liked it, but it made me really know that I wanted to go back into medicine and serve others through the practice of medicine. I was lucky to get into Harvard Medical School. I went there in 1999, but I had no intention of going into research at all. No intention of going to academics. And that's because, look, I was a philosophy major. I'd never studied science. I didn't think that science or academics or that kind of stuff was for me. I thought it was for other people, other smart people, people who had studied other things. So I had no intention to going into academics. But in 2001, my father was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And I didn't know what to do. So I asked around and found a prostate cancer expert. So it turned out there was a professor there at Harvard Medical School named Dr. Anthony D'Amico. And he had become world famous because he had created risk groups for prostate cancer, which are now used universally by every single patient with prostate cancer everywhere in the world. If you have prostate cancer, you're assigned a D'Amico risk group: low risk, intermediate risk, high risk. And so I asked him about my father's prostate cancer, and he actually told me my father's prostate cancer had been mismanaged, and I needed to change the whole thing and get him radiation. And it was through that actually cured my father's prostate cancer and got me into radiation oncology because I saw the power of this field. And Dr. D'Amico became my mentor. And this is what transformed my whole life. And this is why I'm sitting here with you, talking to you today. And it's through the power of research, mentorship through research, and the impact that he had on me. And the impact that he had specifically was to tell me that actually research is something you can do. It's something you can learn. You don't have to be born with a special talent. You don't have to have had all of this training already. You can learn it from the beginning today. And he taught me, and that helped me a lot. And that is what started my career. Back in 2002, I used to drive many miles. This is, I do like a 300-mile drive from Boston down to Philadelphia in order to record data by hand into a computer from patient charts, because Dr. D'Amico used to work at the University of Pennsylvania and he had access to all of these patient charts. So I would drive down there, stay there for days at a time, work there until midnight, just writing down all the data from charts. And this is the kind of stuff that you can do as a student. This led to my first paper, and this was about the impact of seminal vesicle invasion seen on an MRI in prostate cancer on prostate cancer outcome. Basically, we showed that patients with seminal vesicle invasion have a worse outcome, and that makes sense. This was a very low quality paper. I'll be the first to admit now it was a low quality paper because of the number of patients in each arm. We had 141 patients in the group that had no seminal vesicle invasion, but only 17 patients in the group that had seminal vesicle invasion. And so you can see this is a low quality paper because when you look at the Kaplan-Meier curves, there are huge jumps in the Kaplan-Meier curve with each patient that you lose. By the end of this study at 4 or 5 years, we had no patients left at risk in the seminal vesicle invasion arm. But nevertheless, the standards were lower then. So this was back in 2004, literally 20 years ago. And so we were able to get this accepted to the International Journal of Radiation Oncology, Biology, Physics. That journal is now the premier journal in radiation oncology, and they would never consider such a poor quality paper by now, but times were different then. So I'm sorry to say to the people listening now, the standards for research everywhere are much higher now. So you will have to meet a higher bar to get published. This is my match day in 2004 when I found out that I had matched at Harvard for radiation oncology residency, and I really must say the value of a great mentor cannot be underestimated. Other lessons that I've learned in publishing papers is that getting the paper title right can make a big difference. So the research can be the same, but it depends a lot on how you pitch that research to others. What is it that makes that research interesting to others? You have to spin it in a way that gets people excited. This is my first mentee ever. This is Dr. Abiola Ahove, and she came to me through a diversity program at Dana-Farber that was encouraging young students of color to who were underrepresented in medicine to come and do research at Dana-Farber. And basically, she was a student with me. She's now a radiologist. And she did this study looking at what percentage of patients recurred from prostate cancer after 5 years. The question was, if you've made it through 5 years with no recurrence, what percentage of patients would recur after 5 years? Well, we've calculated those and we submitted it to a bunch of journals and everybody was rejecting it. But then one of our colleagues, Dr. Karen Hopkins, said, well, why don't you say that this can allow for a risk-adapted follow-up strategy? So you can adapt your follow-up based on the risk of the patient. And so we just put that in the title. And right away, after we put that in the title, it was accepted at the next journal that we sent it to, which was Urology. And so sometimes just pitching the data the right way makes it interesting enough to get it into a good journal. The other thing that I found important in my career is that writing about issues that people are worried about, timely issues, can improve the impact of the paper. So in 2010, I had my first big hit because people were very worried that prostate cancer treatments were costing too much. People were talking about, oh my gosh, this is costing so much, it's going to cost our economy so much. So I tried to calculate how much are the newest treatments in prostate cancer costing people. And this became a very popular thing, and it got accepted at one of the top oncology journals, which is Journal of Clinical Oncology. And it was simple. It was just calculating the cost of treatments for prostate cancer, specifically the newer treatments that we were seeing. At the time, this was intensity modulated radiation therapy, and this was robotic surgery for prostate cancer. And as you can see, the yellow bar shows that it's costing more and more and more and more and more and more to do these kinds of expensive treatments. And this led to, for example, at the time, an impact of $300 million of extra costs due to these new technologies per year, just to the Medicare United States. So, you know, this was a big deal at the time. The other thing that people were talking a lot about in 2011 was people were worried that androgen deprivation therapy might cause cardiac death. There were all of these warnings, you know, because patients with prostate cancer often have to take androgen deprivation therapy because prostate cancer is a hormone-sensitive tumor. So you give androgen deprivation to shut that off. But there were all these reports that androgen deprivation might cause cardiac death. This is an advisory from the American Heart Association, American Cancer Society, and the American Urologic Association, and it was endorsed by the American Society for Radiation Oncology. And they said, at this point, it is reasonable on the basis of the above data to state that there may be a relation between ADT, that's androgen deprivation therapy, and cardiovascular events and death. And the FDA, which is the Food and Drug Administration that approves drugs in the United States, actually put out a safety communication in 2010. They required these GnRH agonists to put on their label that they might cause an increased risk of diabetes and certain cardiovascular diseases, including heart attack, sudden cardiac death, and stroke. To myself, I thought, wow, this is a huge issue right now. And so I should try to study from the randomized trials whether this is true. You know, is this really true? And so I did a very simple meta-analysis. I was able to do this on my laptop. I was able to do a literature search of the studies that had been published comparing patients who received ADT versus patients who received no ADT in a randomized fashion, and ask whether there is in fact an increased risk of cardiac death. And this led to my highest profile paper ever, which was published in JAMA in 2011. And this was looking at the association of androgen deprivation therapy with cardiac death in patients with prostate cancer. So this study was very easy for me to do. It was a meta-analysis of randomized trials, and we just did it on our laptop. And this was the final result. There was no increased risk of cardiovascular death due to androgen deprivation therapy. So even though the FDA had made them label themselves this way, even though there were all these warnings from these very erudite societies, there was no increased risk from the randomized trials. These are the forest plots. So none of the individual trials showed an increased risk of cardiovascular death from ADT. You can see all of the risk ratios included 1. And when you look at the combined risk ratio, it was 0.93, and the 95% confidence interval was 0.79 to 1.10. So it was exactly the same. But what was important about the paper was that it showed that androgen deprivation therapy reduced prostate cancer mortality and reduced all-cause mortality. So the risk ratio for prostate cancer mortality was 0.69, and for all-cause mortality was 0.86. So the reason why this paper got into JAMA was it challenged a very popular notion at the time, which was that ADT causes cardiovascular death. And it reminded us that, hey, ADT actually saves lives for patients with aggressive prostate cancer. And so this study I got very lucky on was asking it the right question at the right time. And I think that's something you should always think about in your own research career, is how do I ask the right question at the right time? So once you hit on something, this is talking now about how do you build your career. So I got lucky at that time. That was an important paper for me. So people started knowing me to talk about androgen deprivation therapy in prostate cancer. So then you should try to stick to a theme. That way you can build an expertise in a specific area, because there are so many things you can research. But if you want to build a career, you have to choose a certain area to focus on in your research. So I decided to focus on androgen deprivation therapy. And this was one of my mentees, Dr. Catherine Din. She's now an endocrinologist. But we had her study the association of androgen deprivation therapy with depression in localized prostate cancer. And I was the senior author on this, and this got published in the Journal of Clinical Oncology. So we found that androgen deprivation therapy does increase the risk of prostate cancer. Now, I was talking about serendipity in a career, and I must say sometimes you just get completely lucky. So at this point, I was already maybe 5 years or 6 years into my career, and so I was a mid-career faculty member. And I just got lucky because a doctor a young resident just walked right into my, or actually he was a medical student at the time. And he was a medical student who just walked right into my door and was interested in research. This is Dr. Brandon Mahal. And he was a medical student. And he talks about this. He had grown up under difficult circumstances as well, where he was raised by a single mother. His older brothers were in gangs, in street gangs, basically, and were in jail. But they wanted him to have a better life, and they wanted him to get out and be able to do something different. And he did that. He got into UCLA, which is a very prestigious university out in California, and then got into Harvard Medical School, despite a very difficult upbringing. He was actually shot as a child as well, just being caught at the wrong place at the wrong time. And he came to me with a similar story, that he wasn't planning to do academic medicine or wasn't planning to do research at all. He actually was planning to go into urology, but he wanted to go into radiation oncology, do a rotation with me in radiation oncology, just to learn what the radiation oncologists do after he cuts out the prostate. What do we do in terms of radiation afterwards? So he wasn't intending to do research, but I saw that he was very hungry. And I said, hey, Brandon, why don't you come and do research with me? I'll teach you how to do the research. You can do this. And it turned out he was incredible. He got very interested in this concept of what are the factors that drive increased mortality from prostate cancer for African Americans in the United States. It turns out that African Americans are diagnosed with prostate cancer at a 1.6x rate and die from prostate cancer at a 2x rate, or actually 2.4x rate, compared to Caucasian Americans in the United States. And what is the reason for this? And this is what he decided to study. And he actually generated over 100 papers from 2013 to 2020. When I met him in 2013, he had never done research before. And this was him. He was just hungry. He was excited about a concept. And once he learned how to do it, he couldn't stop. And he kept doing more and more and more. And I've had one paper in JAMA. He's had 2 papers in the New England Journal and 2 papers in JAMA already. And so I'm so proud of him and the kind of impact that he can have. This is the kind of impact you can have, those of you who are listening here, if you get excited about a topic and you dedicate yourself to it. This is my picture from Harvard Medical School match day in 2004 with my mentor, Dr. Anthony D'Amico. I was very proud 11 years later to stand in the exact same spot. You see, I tried to recreate the same spot. This is the same building. On the right here is this red building. This is the same building on the left as this gray building here, when Brandon matched on his match day in 2015. Brandon has also had other beautiful contributions in the science. He had an observation, and we had this together early on, that there are some patients with very aggressive grade tumors. They have Gleason grade 8, 9s, and 10s, but have low PSAs. And this is strange because if you have aggressive tumors, in theory, you should be making a lot of PSA. But some patients make very low PSA, and PSA is prostate-specific antigen. And this is a tumor marker that usually goes up when you have prostate cancer. But some patients have aggressive prostate cancer, but a very low PSA. And usually having a low PSA is good, and having a high PSA is bad for mortality. What we found was that for patients with less aggressive Gleason scores, Gleason 6 or Gleason 7, that is the very normal pattern. This is the death ratio if you have, based on your PSA. So if your PSA is low, your death rate is low, but as your PSA climbs, your death rate gets higher and higher. However, we found that for patients with aggressive tumors, there's a U-shaped curve here. At some point, yes, if your PSA goes higher, then your death rate is higher. But if your PSA is very low, your death rate is also very high. And you might say, why? What's going on? Why is it that if you have a low PSA, which is a marker of tumor burden, why does that mean that you have a high death rate? And our suspicion was that if you have an aggressive tumor and you're not making a lot of PSA, then that could be because the tumor has transformed. And maybe it's not a traditional prostate cancer anymore, but maybe it's behaving like something else. And actually, we then sampled tumors that were like this and did genomic profiling and found that this was indeed the case. That for patients with a low PSA but a high Gleason score, these have developed more neuroendocrine features. They have less androgen receptor activity. And so these are going to be less sensitive to hormone therapy. They're behaving less like standard prostate cancers, and they're behaving more like a transformed small cell or neuroendocrine tumor. this observation led to an independent hypothesis by Dr. Anthony D'Amico years later on his own randomized trial. He did a randomized trial of chemotherapy in prostate cancer. We don't use a lot of chemotherapy in localized prostate cancer. But he ran this study, and what he found was that if you add chemotherapy to radiation and hormones in localized prostate cancer, there's no benefit. So in this, here you can see there's absolutely no benefit. However, if you look at the subgroup of patients with a low PSA, which is the subgroup, the same subgroup that Brandon and I had identified back in the day, if you look at these patients do appear to benefit from chemotherapy, which makes sense because the small cell tumors, the neuroendocrine tumors, you treat them with chemotherapy. And so this is all coming together now in a randomized trial. And Brandon did a beautiful patient-level meta-analysis of all of the randomized trials that have looked at chemotherapy in prostate cancer. And what they found was, indeed, they confirmed this exact same finding, that if you have a Gleason score that's high and a PSA less than 4, these are the patients that appear to have a benefit from chemotherapy. This is their death rate without chemotherapy, and this is their death rate with chemotherapy. So a huge benefit to docetaxel. And so in many ways, this is a beautiful full story, full circle story. There's a huge serendipity here that, you know, through this connection, through this idea that we had about a low PSA in a high Gleason score that Brandon came up with, Dr. D'Amico was able to use this in his own randomized trial to basically save his randomized trial and show in that subgroup analysis that the Brandon cohort actually benefits from chemotherapy. And later, Brandon was able to do this beautiful meta-analysis that was published in JAMA Network Open that shows indeed that this group is the group that benefits from chemotherapy. And so it was just a beautiful moment and a beautiful connection. So now I want to talk a little bit about how I got into running large phase 3 randomized trials. I used to not know anything about running randomized trials. Everything that I did was retrospective. And I knew nothing about clinical trials, but I started by opening somebody else's clinical trial. So this is Dr. Glenn Bubley, and he created this phase 2 study of radiation in 6 months of enzalutamide in intermediate risk prostate cancer. And I opened his trial as the leader just at my local site. And this is how I got involved with running clinical trials and understanding how clinical trials run. And the specific question at the time was, can enzalutamide achieve a high cure rate with low toxicity? Enzalutamide was an androgen receptor antagonist. And what it does is it blocks androgen receptor binding. It also prohibits androgen receptor nuclear translocation, and it impairs the androgen receptor from binding and activating DNA. And so it really blocks several steps of the androgen axis. And I enrolled the most patients on this study. We found that 94% of patients met the primary endpoint, and there was very minimal erectile dysfunction. And I was able to be senior author on this study, which was great. But having experience on this small trial helped me to get a larger trial. But I got very lucky. I mean, I had to know how to operate a clinical trial. But this led to me being one of the co-chairs of the phase 3 ENZARAD trial. So this is a big international trial. It's led by Dana-Farber and Australia and Europe and the UK and the Irish consortium. And I got to be one of the co-chairs of this trial. And it was Dr. Chris Sweeney who helped me to get this. So there's a lot of serendipity here, and I have a lot of gratitude for him that he was able to convince industry to create this trial, and he allowed me to be one of the leads as the radiation oncologist. And it's a simple trial. It focuses on high-risk prostate cancer, which is the focus of the rest of the talk. And we randomize these patients 1-to-1 to either the standard, which is radiation and a GnRH antagonist, or the experimental, which is radiation, GnRH antagonist, and enzalutamide. And so this trial is accruing, and we're still waiting for this trial to, and this trial is fully accrued, but we're waiting for it to read out. Interestingly, I'll just tell you briefly about enzalutamide and apalutamide. These are two sister drugs. They were both invented by the same physician. This is Dr. Charles Sawyers. When he was at UCLA, he invented enzalutamide and sold it to Medivation as MDV 3100. And this is clearly now far more than $1 billion drug. But at the same time, he had also created apalutamide. And if you look at the chemical structures of enzalutamide and apalutamide, they're almost identical. They're almost the exact same molecule or compound here. Look, it's just, there's a couple of extra carbon bonds here where they're not existing here, but otherwise exactly the same. But he was able to sell this to a different company, Aragon Pharmaceuticals, and call it ARN 509. And this is also worth more than $1 billion at the time. So these are the two big competitors now in the market, is enzalutamide and apalutamide. And I showed you I did one trial with enzalutamide. And so I went to the other company that was making apalutamide and tried to create a different trial that looks at the population of patients who have already received surgery for their prostate cancer and now have a rising PSA and need to get salvage radiation. And that led to the Formula 509 trial that we just presented at the big ASCO meeting in the plenary session last year. So this was a randomized trial. And, I'll tell you just an inside story is when you make a randomized trial, we used to call randomized trials very boring names like RTOG 9408 or RTOG 9202. Now everybody wants a sexy randomized trial title, a title that you can remember. So I spent most of my time just coming up with an exciting title for the trial. So I call this Facilitation of Radiation Management using Lupron, Abiraterone, and ARN 509 so that it could be called Formula 509. And for those of you who have spent time in the United States, the Formula 409 is a popular cleaning spray, but Formula 509 is a prostate cancer trial. So just keep that in mind. So the schema for the study, these are patients with recurrent prostate cancer after prostatectomy, and we randomized them. Half of them got the standard drugs, GnRH agonists and bicalutamide, and half of them got the experimental drugs, which was abiraterone, prednisone, and apalutamide. And here was the bottom line. When you look at progression-free survival, there was not a clear benefit. And it hurt me so badly because look at the p-value. I want you to see the p-value. The p-value was 0.06. And you probably have seen studies where the p-value is 0.004. And you say, wow, that's great. It's 0.004. That person gets to stand up and say that their research was great. But for every one of those people, there is one of me where the p-value turns out to be 0.06. And it feels like it's so painful. And you may have those experiences in your life, in your research career, but you will bounce back. I promise you. You just have to know that tomorrow's another day. And so there was a benefit, but it wasn't quite statistically significant. The good news was that we did plan one subgroup analysis. You remember Dr. D'Amico's trial? He did a subgroup analysis and he found a benefit there. Well, the same thing happened in my trial. We planned a subgroup analysis among the patients with a PSA greater than 0.5. And among these patients, there was a very big benefit with a hazard ratio of 0.5 and a p-value of 0.03. And so this shows you that when you're planning a big trial like a randomized trial, you should think, well, what happens if it goes wrong and I don't get statistical significance with the overall result? Are there other sub-studies, subset analyses that I can plan to try to give myself a second chance at a result? And here, thankfully, we're able to find a benefit among these patients with a PSA greater than 0.5. Next, I'll talk about genetic diversity or genomic information, basically. And specifically, I wanted to know if we can actually use the genomic information to improve upon the D'Amico risk groups and try to personalize therapy. This is what I'm into now. I think that for the future, we really need to be able to personalize therapy for patients and not just give a one-size-fits-all. So this study that I worked on was about whether we could use the Decipher classifier to try to personalize therapy from patients who just received a biopsy. The Decipher is a 22-feature RNA-based signature developed to predict the risk of metastasis after radical prostatectomy. It looks at cell cycle proliferation, adhesion and motility, immune modulation, and androgen signaling. And at the time, the Decipher test was usually used after surgery. You had to remove the prostate and then run the Decipher test, and it could tell you your risk of metastasis at that point. But the question that I was asking was, well, can you do the Decipher test based on biopsies? Because it'd be much more useful to know it based on biopsies, what your risk is of metastasis, so that then maybe you can make a more informed decision about which treatment you want to do. And so the purpose of this study was to determine whether the Decipher genomic classifier from biopsy specimens is prognostic for metastasis and prostate cancer mortality. And it turns out it is. You can use biopsies and you can use Decipher, low, intermediate, or high, to predict metastases from biopsy specimens. And so what we then did was try to combine this with the D'Amico risk group. So remember, Dr. D'Amico, my own mentor, had created the D'Amico risk groups, low risk, intermediate risk, and high risk, based on clinical features. And the question was, can we add this genomic information to make his risk groups better? And now, just as an interlude, I'll just show you Dr. D'Amico, probably the most famous name in prostate cancer in the world because of his D'Amico risk groups. Prostate cancer, it turns out, and research is his hobby. And his true passion is actually Taekwondo. He's actually a Taekwondo grandmaster, and he started his own line of, or his own school of Taekwondo in the United States called D'Amico Taekwondo, and he has tens of thousands of followers. And this was him, if you want to show, for those of you who are residents, I want to show you what Dr. D'Amico did when he was a resident, and he wanted to show his faculty members, his supervisors, that he really knew how to work hard, and he could take anything and do it, and that they should pick him to be the chief resident. This is what he did. He put on a demonstration, and he had a car drive over him at the University of Pennsylvania. And this is just before they had to decide who would be the chief resident. And after this car drove over him, they picked him to be the chief resident. He's been a wonderful influence in my life. He is the godfather for my two twin daughters. They are 13 years old now, and he's been there every step of the way, every day. And that's been a wonderful thing for me. So I want to talk about this paper. It was led by Dan Spratt, and this was in the Journal of Clinical Oncology, where I was a senior author. And here we combined the risk groups. We combined the genomic information with the clinical risk group. We now call them NCCN risk groups, but they were originally D'Amico risk groups. We combined the clinical and the genomic information to make a combined classifier. And in the validation cohort, the combined classifier works beautifully. That basically, if you're in blue and you're in low risk with a combined clinical genomic classifier, you have 0% risk of dying of prostate cancer. Whereas if you're in the intermediate or high risk group, you have a much higher risk. But this is wonderful to have this combined clinical genomic classifier that works better than the individual classifiers. Now I'll talk about the current trial that I'm working on. The ideal future state for high-risk prostate cancer is not to treat all of the patients one size fits all based on the NCCN or D'Amico risk group classification, but rather to incorporate genomic information. If we had genomic information that the patient has lower genomic risk, then I think it'd be much better to reduce the duration of androgen deprivation therapy. And if somebody has high genomic risk, we might need to intensify their therapy by adding a novel agent like abiraterone, docetaxel, enzalutamide, apalutamide, etc. And so that led to the birth of the NRG-G or 009 trial. This is the current trial that's being led at the NRG level. I am the PI of this trial, and it's a 2,600 patient trial, and it's the fastest accruing trial throughout the United States in high-risk prostate cancer. It's open at 500 different sites in the United States and Canada. And basically, the design of the trial is that for patients with high-risk prostate cancer, we do the Decipher test, which is the test I just showed you. And if you're in the bottom 2/3 of Decipher score, then our goal at that point is to try to de-intensify your therapy. Half of the patients will get the standard, which is radiation and 24 months of hormones. Half of the patients will get the de-escalated, which is radiation and 12 months of hormones. If you have a decipher score in the upper 1/3, so now you have more aggressive prostate cancer, then we'll try to intensify your therapy. In this case, half of the patients will still get the standard 24 months of radiation and hormones, but half of the patients will get 24 months of radiation and hormones plus apalutamide, which is that other drug that looks very similar to enzalutamide. I want to just give you a little picture of how difficult it was to get this trial approved in the United States. So these trials in the United States require a massive amount of money. I would estimate this is something like $40 million to get this trial running. And it's open at 500 sites, but you have to get the approval of the US government to do it. And so I went and presented it at the NRG or RTUG GU Core Committee. And I thought that once it was approved there, it would be approved entirely. But that was not the case. We then had to go through the NRG Physics, Quality Assurance, Quality of Life, and Correlative Committees. So I thought we'd be approved there, but that was not the case. So then we had to go through the NRG Steering Committee. And I thought at that point the trial was approved, but that was not the case either. We had to then go to the NCI Prostate Cancer Task Force. This is the National Cancer Institute. And once that was approved, I thought we were all set, but that wasn't it either. We then had to go to the NCI GU Steering Committee. And so the NCI GU Steering Committee is really then the top board that had to decide whether or not the trial would get approved. And I don't know if any of you have watched Bruce Lee movies, but I grew up, as a child in the 1970s. I loved watching Bruce Lee movies because he was a small Asian man, but he was able to beat everybody up. And so that was great for me as a little kid. But the NCI GU Steering Committee, so in Bruce Lee's Game of Death, he has to keep fighting up higher levels of the pagoda. So he has to go step by step up the pagoda, and he has to fight a boss that's tougher and tougher and tougher. And at the top, which I consider like the NCI GU Steering Committee, he had to fight Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was the basketball player at the time for the Lakers. And so that was very rough. But we were very happy to get through the NCI GU Steering Committee. As it turns out now, many years later, I am the co-chair of the NCI GU Steering Committee now. So now sit on that committee that decides which trials will get approved or not. And so my goal as a member of this committee is to try to make it easier for everybody and all the young investigators trying to get through. Okay, I want to close now. We have 9 minutes left. I want to close now talking a little bit about some of the personal again. This is Dr. Francisco Marti, my wife's mentor in infectious diseases. This is my wife, Sophia. So she's a physician in infectious diseases. And Dr. Marti was her mentor. And this was him in our backyard at the birthday party for our twin girls, having a wonderful time and being there and being always present and taking great photos. And here he had dinner in our backyard with us. This was April 6, 2021. Happy guy, having a great time, and we were having a wonderful dinner on April 6. Literally, he took off for a little vacation in the Dominican Republic, and literally 2 days later, we lost him. He died 2 days later. He had a tragic fall in the Dominican Republic while taking photos. He loved taking photos. That was his most wonderful thing. He loved taking photos, and at age 53, he fell off a 275-foot cliff while he was taking pictures and died. And it was an incredibly tragic loss for us. And we held a Zoom memorial for him because, remember, this was at the height of COVID, and so it was hard to have gatherings. We held a Zoom memorial, and people were saying the most beautiful things about him. And one person commented, all these amazing things we're saying about Francisco now made me so sad that we didn't say them to him while he was still alive. And I think that's often the case, that we often don't appreciate the incredible people that we have in our lives enough until they're gone. And so the two people I called right away, I called first Dr. D'Amico, and I thanked him. I thanked him for being such an incredible part of my life, such a supporting presence, an important person in my life. And I just told him how much I appreciated him at that moment, how much I loved him, because I don't tell him enough. And I called Dr. Prince Davis, who was an ophthalmologist in Oregon, who was the best man at my wedding. And we hadn't seen each other for 10 years. And you, in medicine, you all know how life can get busy and you don't talk to people for a long time. It's not because we don't like each other or we're not friends. It's just everyone gets so busy. I hadn't seen him for 10 years. So I called him right away. I said, Prince, I haven't talked to you in 10 years. I love you. I miss you. You are an important part of my life. And I think that's really important that we remember people in our lives because we could lose them at any moment. Here was Dr. D'Amico's 60th birthday party. And I threw him a big old birthday party on Zoom so we could bring all of the people in his life together and get him really happy and really excited about that. And we had a beautiful party for him there. So do reach out and fully acknowledge your gratitude to the wonderful people in your life every day. We never know when one day may be their last or our last. I also want to remember Dr. Claire Beard. She was a dear partner of mine in my department, and we lost her in 2021, the same year that we lost Francisco. And another dear colleague in my department, Dr. Lursa Lee, she was actually 1 year younger than me. We did medical school together. We did residency together. We worked side by side. And she died of a metastatic colon cancer at age, I think she was 44 at the time, and she left behind 2 young children. So again, we have to just remember everybody in our lives and appreciate them and appreciate every moment that we have. So a little epilogue for you. Just so that you may wonder what happened. So this is my mom and her sister before the landmine. This is when they were 11 years old and 8 years old. So it turned out, this was 1965, turned out 2022, 2024, they're doing great. Both of them are healthy. They're both living in America. And this is them in the backseat of a car, just as happy as ever, having just as much fun as when they were 11 and 8, despite the landmine and despite the journey across the sea. And I find this, when I think about the arc of life, I find this very improbable and amazing. You might find it interesting. You remember this man I was talking about, Governor Michael Dukakis. He was the Democratic presidential nominee who lost to George Bush in 1988. He was my childhood hero. And he really told me that, hey, I could have a place in America because even the son of an immigrant can be president in America. Well, it turns out that I bought the house that is connected to Governor Michael Dukakis, and we have the same backyard. That backyard that I showed is a backyard that he and I share together, and we've become closest of friends, and he's also like another grandfather to my twins, and they just know him as Mike. They don't know that he was once potentially the most powerful man in the world. And I find this improbable and truly amazing. And this is him with my twin daughters, and we're planting in the front yard that we have together. And, once I was in 1979, a 3-year-old wearing lederhosen in New York City. And now today I get to give the keynote address at the University of Jordan, which I'm truly honored. And I find this also improbable and amazing. And so I really appreciate the time that you gave me today and the listening ear. I really wish all of you a huge amount of success in your research careers, and that you'll have a huge amount of learning in this research workshop, this incredible research workshop that you're doing now. And really, once again, I'm really happy to be here. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak to you. I'm grateful for the opportunities that research has given me to travel the world, to have an impact on patients, and to meet and reach incredible people like you. So thank you very much for your time today.
Wow, wow, wow. That was amazing. That was amazing. Thank you so much, Professor Paul. That's just amazing. So inspirational, and I really loved the way you blended, the content with, some really powerful stories. So really, really, I cannot say thank you enough for kickstarting this conference in such a powerful, powerful way. I don't know, Laila, do you want to give a few minutes for some people to ask Paul a question? Because I don't know, he has to run, but I know, this is a really great opportunity to have somebody like him.
Well, I appreciate the really nice comments in the chat. Oh, I see a question about enzalutamide and apalutamide. Yeah, so these are both second generation anti-androgen drugs that you can use, and both of them improve survival in metastatic prostate cancer. And so what we're trying to do with those drugs is move them earlier into the non-metastatic space. That's really the focus of my work and the focus of my trials, is move those metastatic drugs into the non-metastatic space and try to get more cures early. To Mohammed, thank you for your question. My father did pass away in 2020, so he passed away 4 years ago. He lived until age 85, and I often say that, of course, I'm so sad my father passed away, but he got to live 2 lives. He actually was in Vietnam until he was age 42, and he was a single man, childless. I think his prospects for getting married in Vietnam were basically zero at that point. But because of the war, he jumped into a fishing boat with a younger lady who turned out to be my mother, and they got together, and he had a whole second life in America, another 43 years in America, where he got to raise 3 children and see them go on to have their own lives and careers. So I feel very grateful and blessed for that. So he is passed. Thank you for asking, but he got to live 2 lives. So I feel very grateful for that. And I'm just looking through and just seeing these really beautiful comments, and I appreciate that very much. I'm very grateful to you all.
So Paul, you may not know there's an auditorium. I think there are some more people in the hall that you are not seeing. You're only seeing the ones online. So that's why I was asking if Laila had questions. But we really thank you so much for the responding to the ones in the chat. And again, I just feel like it should be the keynote for so many different things that we have coming up. It was just so inspirational and powerful. So thank you so much. And I really appreciate you showed the mentors, but I know I'm one of those people who really, really benefited from your mentorship. You are so young, but you've really had an impact in so many people's lives. And even the people that I have impact on, I think I credit that to you. So you hiring me at Harvard, you're the one who interviewed me. So I really appreciate you, Paul.
Well, Will, you've been so incredible in how you've just spread out and reached so many people. And I think all of us have something special in us, and the job of a mentor is just to have people have your mentees recognize that beautiful strength that they have within. And you've done that so well for so many people.
Thank you. All right, it's 10 o'clock, and I think, let's see, Laila, are you there? Do you have any comments before Paul leaves?
You are muted, Laila.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. I've been talking, but
There's a bit of an echo happening with some feedback.
yeah, I wanted to really thank Dr. Paul. And it's fascinating, all the genomics studies. I was just wondering if this had been done on any Middle Eastern populations before, and if not, then maybe something like that can be initiated, and we hope to see you in Jordan.
Yeah, thank you. What a great question. So I would say that at the moment, I don't think this has been done on Middle Eastern populations. It started in the United States, and then it spread to the Western Europe populations because of the Stampede trial there. So we've been running it in the Stampede trial. And then there has been an interest from researchers to do this because of the African-American mortality difference. There's been an interest to run this on patients from West Africa. And so there is some momentum growing to gather samples there. But as far as I know, there's not something going on Middle Eastern population. I think that'd be an important thing, and be happy to talk about that further. And would love to come to Jordan again. It was amazing.
Great. That would be so fantastic. So fantastic, Dr. Paul. Thank you so much. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, that's very clear now. Actually, the echo is gone.
Okay, good. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I know that you have other things scheduled now, so I will take my leave to allow you to stay on time. But thank you so much. I'm very grateful for this.
Thanks so much. Take care and God bless.
You too.
It is our pleasure to present our next speaker, Dr. Yasmin Karim Sadia from Harvard University. And Dr. Ngwa will present Dr. Yasmin. Will?
Yes, thank you, Laila. Did you want to just continue now or you want to give a break? I just wanted to check because I saw there was a break in the calendar.
Yes, no, we can continue.
Okay, fantastic.
And Dr. Yasmin is already with us, so.
Okay. Right. Wonderful. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce to you our next speaker, Dr. Saida Yasmin Karim. It's very wonderful, kind of interesting that she comes after the talk that we had with Professor Paul Ngwa, because Paul was like the mentor that recruited me to Harvard. And then I was the one who recruited Dr. Yasmin Karim to Harvard. Like you were showing how this mentorship is really, really critical. And I think that, you know, as we think about research, this is one of the things that is really, really important to think about your mentors and appreciate them. And it was just remarkable. So Dr. Yasmin Karim has actually been an inspiration for me in the work that she's been doing. She led, you know, all the amazing work that has come out that she's done, you know, around cancer. So currently she is faculty at the Harvard Medical School and also at Brigham and Women's Hospital and Dana-Farber. And so she is doing some tremendous work around radioimmunotherapy and genomics, working with Professor Mike Makrigiogos. She was originally born in Bangladesh, and then she did, so she's actually an MD PhD, so it's a really good model for everybody to kind of look at how, even as a medical with an MD degree, you can also have a PhD degree, you know, in the research area. So she's really done some tremendous work around, you know, cancer, and we're so excited and honored that she can talk to us today about some insights into the work that she's been doing. So I'm going to hand over to you, Dr. Saida, to talk about
the research design. Yeah. So
fundamentals of research design. That's exactly.
Yeah. So thank you very much, and Dr. Ngwa, for introducing me. And I am blessed to have a mentor like Dr. Ngwa, who actually not only helped me to explore myself, also keep me continue ongoing and keeping a good outcome of my my works to be shown in different perspective. So today I will be discussing about some research design methodology for a typical clinical trial. So I need to share my screen.
You do have permissions.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so can you see my screen?
We can see the PowerPoint app itself. Do you want to put it in presenter mode?
Yes, please.
To do so, you'll have to click on either Start Slideshow or down at the bottom. Yep. Looks good.
So my topics today is fundamentals of research design. Okay, so for this study, I designed some slides where to describe very basic about the generation of a research design or behind the scene, what we do, and give overall perspective or overall idea of a research design. So this is not very in-depth, but this is not kind of a superficial touch base of all the methods and behind the scenes and how a research design can be uh, 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 designed to have a successful design, stuff like that. So let's start from the objectives, why we do a clinical trial. So overall, the objectives for the clinical trial is to establish the effect of an intervention. It can be it can be compared to it can be any lifestyle, any drug, any other mechanism. Anything can be a clinical trial which will be tested among the population. So compared to other types of study design, design randomized trial have high validity, and it is the more difficult and expensive to conduct the trial. So some of that wordings, we also have to understand what does it mean for going through a study. So one of those, I will mention few of them to understand the later part of the study. So one of the word people always hear about what is alternative hypothesis. So the alternative hypothesis would claim that would like to be made at the end of the trial, which be declared the scientific method states to prove something, assume the complement is true, and then look for the contradictory evidence. And if a sufficient contradictory evidence is observed, then the desired claim has to be proven. So always we say the opposite of alternative hypothesis is null. I will say null hypothesis. So the null hypothesis always always try to disapprove the null hypothesis to come to which is the common state of condition. So then the alternative hypothesis has to be proved that the study has been successful. But in case of we fail to prove the alternative hypothesis, that means the study is not actually successful or it doesn't bring any effect. And one more word we usually see in study is called ITT, which is intent to treat. It is also called strategy for conducting a trial and analyzing data. So next, before we go more details, I also go one more word, statistical word, which is called power. The probability of rejecting the null hypothesis when it should be rejected. So this power is also a very common word we usually see. I will come to this later. So at first, I want to describe a little bit inside of clinical trial steps. Let's see. Okay, so first we when the clinical trial begins. So when we finish study on animal, then we go for the next step would be typically the next step should go for the clinical trial. So there are different steps for clinical trial. At first, we call it, maybe it's as T1, which is the study 1 in small group, and T2 around medium group with around 100 people, T3 about 1,000 people, and T4 it should be studied in globally. So what we intend to study in T1, it is also mentioned some phase 1 study where we study for safety in a small cohorts. So in this study, we select a group of population from the healthy population or the disease population. I will come in details later, but in phase 1, we study for a small group of population to verify the safety of this drug or intervention. And in phase 2, which is between these two T1 and T2 group, where we do the clinical trial in patients of multiple clinics. And also in phase 3, which is typically under phase 2, under the T2, we go for clinical trial in patient in multiple clinics. I will come in details of it. And in T3 and T4, which typically phase 4 of the study, which is cost-effective comparison, and we go for bigger groups of population. So in T3, as I mentioned before, around thousands of people, and T4, it should go globally. So where the FDA come to intervene. Before we go to T3 and T4, it has to be approved by FDA. And after the study, the treatment goes to the mainstream. If this study becomes successful, then this go for mainstream treatment. And then if this become a very important study, like for example, cholesterol medication or when they found that cholesterol is a main cause of one of the main cause for heart diseases or heart attack. So they may come to investigate what like more details about why this study has been successful and what is the cause for the disease. For example, I was mentioning the cholesterol drug and cholesterol, and then people may go for changing a public policy, like in terms of salt or making the high blood pressure. So the public policy like reduce the salt in most of the we can call food fortified food. So we may come through the public policy for reduction of fortifying salt in different food items and stuff like that. So this is the overall idea for a step-by-step process for going through the clinical trial for our approval and continuation of a drug. And it takes a long time and costs lots of money. From going from phase 1 to phase 4, it may take 10 to 15 years and may cost a fortune, $1 billion or more or less. So overall, in phase 1 study, the phase 1 is the first study conducted in human after the animal, as I mentioned before. So these are in a small group of population, maybe under 20, may enroll healthy participants. And the purpose of this study to investigate the pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, and the safety of this drug. So we measure how it goes to the body, how long it stays in the body, and what is the mechanism of excretion of this drug. And in that case, we can decide that if this organ is not good, then this should not be given to a patient. Maybe it can be excreted through the lung or feces or urine. We decide, and then how long it takes and what is the chemicals to deactivate this drug, what is the liver function liver does to deactivate this drug, or it can be excreted without deactivating. So for phase 1 study, it can be phase 1A or phase 1B. In phase 1A, the study safety, tolerability, and pharmacokinetics is tested in healthy volunteers. And in phase 1B, study tolerability of pharmacokinetics can be tested in patient volunteers. For example, in phase 1 trial for a new blood pressure medication, so phase 1A, at first it has to tested in healthy volunteer to see what happened to the safety issue and pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics of this drug, and then it comes to patient volunteers with high blood pressure to see if the blood pressure patient have this drug, how this drug has been excreted, or if the toxicity is higher or lower, or if it is the same in these patient conditions. So for phase 2 of the trial typically conducted to investigate a dose-response relationship, so identify an optimal dose and to investigate the safety of the drug. So this is more details more. It can give some kind of idea of giving higher dose or lower dose for the drug. So they sometimes are called confirmatory trial or registration trial in context to pharmaceutical development. So then we go for phase 3 of the trial. Generally, these are large trial. Many study, it goes from different, as I mentioned earlier, it can be done by many clinical trial groups or many hospitals or many clinics. They sometimes call confirmatory trial or registration trial, okay, for phase 3. For phase 4, the trial carried out as after registration of an intervention. They are generally very large. As I mentioned before, it can be done in thousands of people, and then from thousands of people, it goes to global. So this study is go for very long, very large number of population to gain more experience. And as I mentioned before, the phase 3 study, also a bigger study, goes to typically maybe thousands or more. And phase 4, it more than 1,000, it goes maybe global in one area or in multiple countries or multiple variation of race, and other informations can be gathered from phase 4 study. So these are the more fundamental part of this study for clinical trial. So now during the clinical trial process, there might be multiple strategies we have to make for who to keep a clinical trial give a successful clinical trial. So that can be clarified many other informations which are very important to keep the clinical trial ongoing. So like for those are minimizing the variation of the control or the treatment group, randomization, blinding, placebo effect, selection of control group, selection of target group, many others. So I will go step by step to mention all those design issues for a clinical trial to have a better understanding for a typical clinical trial. So before I go in depth, do you want to take a 15 minutes break or I should continue? Just to ask. Should I continue or? Anyway, so let me go through the process first. So in that case,
Dr. Yasmin, please continue.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. So and now, as we understand different phases of our clinical trial, which I discussed, I'm gonna go one more time to make it clear for the study. So going from different phases, like phase 1, as I mentioned, for in a small 10 to 20 people, which can be studied into at the beginning with a healthy group, and then after the healthy group is done, then we can pick up a small group with the typical disease. Like for diabetic drug, we can pick up a diabetic group of patient. For blood pressure group of patient, like that, typical, to make sure the pharmacokinetics and the toxicity is similar to the affected group compared to a healthy group. So for phase 2 and 3, we go for the clinical trial into multiple clinics with a small group of population. And phase 3 and 4, we go for the clinical trial into a bigger group of population, where at the beginning, we select population by our choice, about thousands. We recruit the patients and give the trial to those patients. And then in phase 4, it go a successful application of phase T3 of phase 4 moves to globally. So we after all those typical stages, we overall to selecting the patient, selecting the control, selecting the placebo, all those things has to be properly done to make the study confirmatory or typical, if it is healthy for the patient and healthy for the and improvement of the disease has been shown. So now I will go for the rest of the study, which called designing issues in a clinical trial. So for designing issue, at first we have in our mind what is the question we are trying to do. Next comes minimizing the variations. Next, randomization and stratification. Then blinding, then placebo and shams. Then selection of a control group. Then selection of a population and entry criteria. Selection of endpoints, and preventing missing data and encouraging adherence to protocol, then sample size and planning for interim analysis. So we'll go step by step briefly in all those issues, starting from what is the question. Okay. So at first we go the typical trial thing in our mind. We have to decide what we are looking for. So the primary, all the clinical trial comes with the research question, primary research question. So the question has to be very clearly defined. So understanding of the research question is very important for studying of a disease. It cannot be a vague concept, is to be very clear and very what we intend to see. So to see if this drug is work, or to look into the neurobiology or any other effect. Any study has to go through a clear concept, like what we like to see in these patients. And then secondary research question may also be interest. Like, for example, if we address a primary research question, if there might be, if there is a inter-drug relationship, the timing issue, or any other who should not get it. Like, for example, a drug has been shown to be excreted through the kidney, so it should not be given to a kidney patient or a dialysis patient. So those are the secondary question, but primary question, we have to figure out this, what we intend to see into for the confirming the outcome of the clinical trial. So next, we have to think about minimizing the variation. For minimizing the variation, so we have to find typical control group or treatment group where we can figure out what we are looking for. So the large number of variation of the patients, like for example, if somebody has multiple disease, or one person has only one disease, or one person has some other background, different background, or different age variation, or different gender variation, those brings secondary increase the variability of the study, which may reduce the outcome confirmation. So thus minimizing the variation should be a fundamental element of the clinical trial at the very beginning. Minimizing variation can be accomplished by several ways. One important method of reducing variation is to construct constant and uniform endpoint definitions. Identify endpoints could be measured even different phases. Like, for example, of these are some of the example I also mentioned for in some NI study. They, however, some NI studies are example to define how the endpoints, they precisely design the study targeting the precise endpoints to come to conclusion of the study. Or we can also think about minimizing, selecting the patient, what we want to typically see in this patient, or gender or age variation is very important. Those are the variation has to be very typically maintained. So randomization and stratification, also this is very important. The success of a study depends on this randomization idea. So randomization is the most powerful tool for studying, and it also helps to control for bias in a clinical study. It essentially eliminates also bias from the treatment group and from the control group. Importantly, issues expectation of the balance of all factors has to be all factors has to be taken in randomization. For example, gender is a potential confounding for estimating the affecting intervention for a stroke patient. So, so if we just study in one gender and ignore the other gender, that might bring the study for bias treatment, or it may not give a good outcome of the study here. So typically at the very beginning of our study, like phase 1, we do not want very variation. We want very less variation of the study, which I was mentioning, minimizing the variation word. So in minimizing the variation is very important in phase 1 of the study, where you do not want to see too many people with too many variation to observe the many variation of the population to observe the outcome of the drug properly. And for all other studies, we welcome the randomization to minimize like a tunnel vision of a study to see only one population group where we do not know what happened to the other population. So this is very important part of the study. So I need to clarify between the differences here. So after randomization, we also need to specify the blinding effect of the study, like how we can typically keep the population or the participant of the study not to know what groups they belongs to. So blinding is a very fundamental tool for a clinical trial, and this is also a powerful method which prevent the biasness of the study. So blinding, keeping study participants, blinding it refers for the participants, the investigator, and also the other associates of the study who are not typically knows what is the outcome we are looking for, and what we should, and also the participant should not know what they are in control group or treatment group. Those are very important tools for going through the study. So this actually prevent the biasness, affect the behavior, and unnoticeable or unintentional behavior can be cause the failure of the study if we don't keep the people blind. For example, if an investigator knows this is the group of the population I try to intend for seeing a drug or treatment group, and this group is this population is the control group. So the investigator, when he is analyzing the outcome of the study, might get into a condition where he may go biased towards treatment and turn the drug to be favorable, but that may not be a favorable drug. And for patient's view, if the patients know that this is I am having the drug, then the patient will have kind of a I will say euphoric effect that, oh, I am feeling better, I'm having a drug. And the control group, if they know that they are not having the real drug, they are taking, they will think that, oh, I'm not having that drug, so I will not be treated. So to get all those confounding effect, we try to keep the group blinded. So the blinding can be desirable in different levels. So if it's a single blind, which blinding the we can blind the study participants. So the control group and the treatment group doesn't know which groups are they belongs to. And in double-blinded studies, we keep the study participants and the investigator, both are blinded. So here the investigator doesn't know what the investigator is looking to a control group or a treatment group. So we keep them blinded. And triple blinding, it keeps blinded for everybody. It's include investigator, participants, sponsors, or assessors. Everybody is blinded in this study. And so some study which are without blinding, we can call open label study. So next, we decide about the placebo or shams. So this is a very important part of the study of a clinical trial also. So what actually means by placebo or shams? A placebo defined as an inert pill or injection or other sham intervention that marks as an active intervention in an effort to maintain blinding of treatment assessment. So in here, we actually, the control group and the treatment group, both will get a treatment a pill. For the control group, it should be a inert material where it will not generate any reaction or any action. And for the treatment group, we give the typical treatment. So the placebo, this is very important tool also to keep the study blinded. So the treatment group doesn't know what he's getting, and the control group doesn't know what they're getting. So the terms, it's a general, we can call also a sugar pill, which doesn't contain an active ingredients for treating the underlying disease or any other syndrome. And it's a trial to control account for a natural history of a disease or for psychological effect. So these are a very important part of the clinical trial. And one disadvantage of this placebo, sometimes it's become very costly to find a very inert material to apply where this can be not generate any reaction to the body condition, other condition, or not with the disease condition. So this can be costly to obtain. Also, the inability to use placebo is common in development of devices. Just for example, a surgical trial. We do not want to do a sham surgical incision to a patient. So, in some cases, we cannot use a sham or placebo trial. So next, we'll discuss about selection of a control group. So this is very critical decision in a clinical trial. The control group provides data that what would happen to participant if they are not treated or had received a different intervention. So at the very precisely, the clinical control group has to be treated, collected, make sure they do not have been treated earlier, or they have they are taking a different intervention. So maybe we are trying for a drug to check, but the control patient may be trying to have another drug to control the same disease. So we may misunderstand the control person, thinking of the control is already under control, so that that is not actually giving us the full picture. So the control has to be very carefully chosen and very selectively taken. So without the control group, this is very important tool, as I mentioned. Without this control group, the researcher would be unable to discriminate, the intervention, about the cause and effect of the intervention. And there are some conditions where we can figure out the patient or the clinician expectations, and how we will figure out the control group has to be taken as control. This criteria has to be defined by the clinician group or the investigation group to collect proper control group of investigational patient. So for this, that's why there are different varieties of control group can be, different types of control group can be. So one will be historical control groups. Those controls are obtained from studies that have already been conducted and are often published in medical literature. Historical controls are rarely used in clinical trials for drug development due to concern for bias. And placebo or sham controls, as I mentioned earlier about how we decide to have the placebo and sham controls. I will not go details here. And the next one is active control. An active control is an active intervention that has even shown effectiveness to treat the disease under study. Often, active control is selected because it is the standard of care treatment for a disease under study. For example, we try to confirm one diabetic medication which is better than the previous diabetic medication. So in that control group, we actually give their standard of treatment, what they are taking right now, to prove that no, this is our better treatment. This is our better way of treatment. So we are comparing standard of care with a new treatment category. So in that case, the control group will we call active controls, because they are already in a drug regime which is currently standard of care. And next will come selection of population and entry criteria. This is very important for this is very, very important for a clinical trial. So in selecting population to enroll into a trial, researcher must consider the target use of intervention, since it is desirable to generalize the results of the trial to target population. So we have to see who are the target population, and if we have enough target population recruited for the trial, those has to be concerned in selecting the population. Researchers also select entry criteria to help ensure a high quality trial to address the specific objective of the trial. So this is the, I'll say this is the gate to keep to get a very specific answer to the question, because if you dilute your entry criteria with multiple diseases, for example, we are trying to have a patient for clinical trial with high blood pressure, for example, or a diabetic patient, for example. So we have to make sure while we are selecting those patients, we should not see a patient with a complicated high blood pressure or complicated diabetic patient we are taking. For example, if we take a high blood pressure patient with a kidney failure condition, or a high blood pressure or a diabetic patient with kidney failure condition, we may not be able to continue with the patient. The patient may go for, that may develop excretory condition of this drug, which is not a typical excretory method. And the patient, we may lose the patient. So everything has to be considered when we selecting the population group for study. The safety of the study of the participant is also important here. For example, if we are trying to have a drug which might have a we don't know how it behave to the patient. In that case, yeah, I also should mention typically for some cancer drugs, which we do not want to try in normal healthy population. In that case, we go for a patient with stage 4 cancer, so that we do not hamper the lifespan of a healthy person. So the safety of the participant is very important for the patient also. So the selection of the population depends on also on the trial phase, since different phases have different objectives. As I mentioned earlier, early phase trial tend to select population that are more homogeneous, since it is easier to reduce response variation and thus isolate effects, as I mentioned earlier. And the later phase of the trials tend to target more heterogeneous populations, since it is described to have the results of such trial to be generalizable and ultimately go for the global population. That more heterogeneous population for later studies is better compared to the early phase of the trials. So the phase 3 trials tend to have more relaxed entry criteria that are representative both demographic and underlying disease status to the patient population for which the intervention is targeted to treat, as I mentioned earlier. So next would be selection of endpoints. The selection of endpoints is very important. Every category is very important to maintain in a clinical study design. So each step has to satisfy its own criteria to get a very, very strong and very successful outcome. So selection of the endpoints in a clinical trial requires very relevance and statistical reasoning. The motivation for every clinical trial begins with a scientific question. The scale of the primary endpoint impact the analysis, trial power, also the cost. So endpoints can generally be categorized by their scale of measurement. The 3 most common types of endpoints in clinical trial are continuous endpoints, which is pain on a visual analog scale, where we can say that what is the pain level which is reduced from 9 out of 10 to 5 out of 10, or where 9 is the or 10 is the highest and 0 is the lowest. Or the we can also categorize the endpoint as a binary, is response or not response. Does it affect or help or not help? It doesn't categorize the what degree of effect it has. Or the time point can be time to death, like for some maybe some of the drug, like kidney failure drug, or cancer treatment drug, which we can designate as, can we extend the life expectation? So the death might be ultimately the endpoint. So if we can extend the life expectation from a few months to a few years, that's like a huge success of this drug. And for selection of endpoints, classified or maybe classified also an objective or subjective. The objective endpoints can be measured without or like prejudice or favor. Like, for example, death is an objective endpoint in a trial of stroke. Subjective endpoints are more susceptible to individual interruption. For example, neuropathy trial employ pain as a subjective endpoint. So as I mentioned earlier with the example of the pain study, that increase or decrease, or depression, or an anxiety drug, or a sleep quality drug, that can be like you can see how good in for those drugs for reducing the pain or the lifestyle improvement. And for objective, we see how we can extend the death or life expectancy, extend the life expectancy, or go for longer duration of life, instead measuring life and death situation here. So there another some other information about the endpoints, which can also mention that composite endpoints or surrogate endpoints. In composite endpoints, its intervention can have effects on several important endpoints. It's not depends on one single measurement. Just for example, in Charisma, had by 2006, or math study by on 2004, and Kerry study committee in 1996 are those studies were of the clopidogrel for prevention of vascular ischemic events, use combinations of different endpoints like myocardial infarction, or heart attack, or stroke, or death, and rehospitalization as a component of composite endpoints. So here it's not only single outcome they measure, they look for multiple outcomes to measure the endpoints of a study. And the surrogate endpoints, in some diseases, it may take a long time to observe the definitive endpoints like that. An example of surrogate endpoints is blood pressure for a hemorrhagic stroke. Usually when we have hemorrhagic stroke, which means that high blood pressure may tear a blood vessel in the brain, which may cause the stroke. So if we see the patient are taking this drug and reduce the incidence of stroke, like hemorrhagic stroke, we may mention this is a good endpoint for the study. This the endpoint measurement that is predictive for a clinical event but takes a shorter time to observe. So the definitive endpoints often measures clinical benefits, whereas the surrogate endpoints tracks the progress or extent of the disease. As I mentioned, the clinical typical study for the other endpoint may be, defining like life or death, yes or no. But the surrogate may define for a longer duration, like how, or diabetes drug, how long if the patient take it doesn't develop any side effect or complication from diabetes, or a blood pressure medication if a patient is taking, how long the patient doesn't develop any kind of complication of the disease. So this can be like a more open-ended and see the extension of the disease for a longer duration. Surrogate endpoints could also use when clinical endpoint is too expensive or difficult to measure or ethical to measure. For some of the this can be done when we cannot wait too long to see blood pressure medication is working for a very long duration or for time. It is to maintain this longitudinal study becomes too expensive. So we can go for a typical cutoff point to see how the patient is doing compared to the not given the treatment group. The next, we discuss about preventing missing data or encouraging adherence to the protocol. This is a very common problem for a study because we enroll the patients, but we cannot keep the patients in the study. So we miss the data. So before we enroll the patient, we have to consider or think some of the criteria we should maintain. So this is this actually really hurt the integrity of a clinical trial. This can be this data, all this missing data also may generate bias estimation because we may not get as many patients we get, or we may have more control group or more treatment group. There might be disproportionate of the group, which may generate a biasness of the study. Important when design, this is very important when considering the methods for selecting the patient for a trial to prevent the missing data. So there are some tools which we may follow to reduce the missing data. So designing the simple clinical trial, for example, designing protocols that are easy to adhere to, having easy instructions, having patients visits and evaluation that are not too burdensome for the patient, having very short, clear case report form that are easy to complete by the patient, and adhere to the ITT principles. As I mentioned what is ITT before. This is the intention for the treatment, following all patients after randomization for the scheduled duration follow-up regardless of the treatment status of the patient. So that has to be adhered to the ITT principle of the study. All the controls group or the treatment group has to be follow up properly as the schedule of the study design. So those has to be maintained. Like if we select some patients which are very far away or doesn't have a very good transportation to come to a station where we ask them to come, that might reduce the adherence of the study, or in some cases, we may find some patient who are seems to be very very not history of not very cooperative or not very um, taking this seriously or not very eager to be a part of the study. We should not force those people to be in the study. There is a very strong chance they may be drop out from the study. So for example, at the beginning of the study, we like to enroll as many as people. So we take whoever is coming for the study, we will take them. So that might make this study for not with more higher missing data, because if we don't consider all the socioeconomic condition of the patient and where the patient lives, or if it is too troublesome for the patient to come, or in other words, we may generate a different way of collecting the outcome. We can give them a questionnaire, or we may have a different way. We can send a group for study investigator, keeping blinded, to send to the patient to collect the data. But whatever we do, we have to consider it has to be done maybe in typical, not generating any biasness of the study. Like if some patients are coming to the station and giving, and some are not coming, going there. So that has to be make consideration. So this to collect the missing data, we should not make our study biased. And more important part is also a sample size. The sample size is very crucial also for the study of a clinical trial. The very small sample size may not give us a very good outcome or intention we are looking for. We may get more biased outcome for a small sample size. And if it is very large sample size, we may waste our resources, which we may not keep in track of many patients, and we may lose the study adherence. And calculation of the sample size requires clearly defined objective, and the analysis to address the objective must then envision via a hypothesis to be tested or a quantity to be. So we have to, go for as I mentioned, that we have to have a very clear question about the alternative hypothesis or null hypothesis which we are testing. So we have to be very precisely decide our null hypothesis. To prove the alternative hypothesis is correct. A sample size is then biased on the plan analysis if we do not have a proper sample size. And next, which is last but not the least, is planning for interim analysis. So interim analysis should be considered also during our trial design, since it can be affect the sample size and planning of the trial. When the trial is very large or long in duration, it is very important for planning interim analysis. When the intervention have associated with serious safety concern, it is also very important to have interim analysis. In some cases, if we see that some drug or intervention may hurt some of the patient, or it may not going forward with the intention we are looking for. If it's actually hurting the patient, sometimes the interim analysis gives us those clues, and we may need to considering closing the study also if it is very troublesome for the patient. The interim data also in some drug which might have known as a serious side effect. Like, for example, some of the statin drug, when it can at the very beginning was trying the cholesterol patient, was very important thing to for interim analysis to see if these patients are developing any liver problem to continue with the study. So these are very important tools to think about for designing a study, even though it's shown to be simple, but any of the not properly addressing any of those design issues may generate a failed trial, or spending so much money, but there is no data found. So typically for the interim study, we all typically has to have a data monitoring board. This typical group of independent experts, those people are not associated with the trial, but with the relevant expertise in the disease and treatment being studied. So they may be clinician, statistician, which will be recruited for a data safety monitoring board. And careful planning of interim analysis is very important for our trial design. So it has, as I mentioned, it avoids inflation of the statistical error rates associated with multiple testing to avoid other biases, and that can arise by examining data prior to the trial completion and maintain the trial blind. Some other factors we also should know with some error might happen in a typical study, who is the probability of type 1 error, or we call false positive. And there is another error, which is type 2 error, we may call false negative. So as the false positive or false negative, I mentioned, it's a very this word is explanatory. So the probability of rejecting the null hypothesis when it should be rejected. This is the statistical sounding. Like when we false positive means like when the drug is actually not working, but we mention, yes, it is working. So this is, we can say, false positive that come from the biasness from all other study design we are looking for. If we are not properly maintaining that, the study can be outcome by false positive. The superiority trials, this means the probability of incorrectly identify a treatment effect when indeed the true treatment effect doesn't exist. So this biasness might jeopardize the, if we have in phase 1, if we have this false positive, it may, and we do not know or identify the type 1 error, we may spend billions of dollars at the end finding out this is not a correct drug, and when it comes to the population, it has to be withdrawn from the population after spending lots of money. So this error has to be considered not to happen. So every space has to be go through a very qualitative work to prevent this type of error happening. And next, we may see false negative. Here, it may give the opposite part, the drug actually affecting, but we may find it's not affecting. This may happen for wrong selection of a control patient. Maybe we cannot find proper selection of a control patient may give us, may prevent this type of error happen. So sometime we are rejecting, this study may give us kind of a not the power to rejecting the null hypothesis. So this may have opposite effect. In super trial means that the probability of failing to identify a treatment effect when indeed a true treatment effect exists. So this is also very important. We know this is the drug should affect, but with very specific outcome, but by some of our study design, we fail to prevent null hypothesis. So this is also another example. We have to precisely and properly design a study for a clinical trial to prevent this type of error happening. So some of the common structural design, I'll mention a little bit of these for the study, which are common clinical trial design include single aim trial or placebo control trial or crossover trial, factorial trial, non-inferiority trial, designed for validating diagnostic devices. Those are some of the trials which are very, looks like a jargon, but these are some of the name of the trials. I will not go too much depth into each of the trials, but I will say the structural design is depend on what is the specific research interest or characteristics of the disease or therapy or endpoints and the availability of the control and the funding. All those are important for common structural design for a study. So we also have to know our parameters before we start designing a trial. So for example, if we know that we do not have much funding and we start a big group of clinical trial, for example, phase 2 trial with multiple multiple clinics with a huge number of population, but at the end we may not be successful to complete all those study. Rather, maybe we should try in one clinics to complete a trial into one clinic with the monetary balance we have. So these are, everything has to be considered before we selecting structural design of a study. Nothing is least important for a successful study design. And just to mention, this is also important, timeline for drug development for an example. So this drug, well, one of the drugs, just for saying that when the IND was submitted in 2009 and phase 2 and phase 3 trial was completed in 2014 with a different section has been done in different time points. So this is also important to know that this is a trial is also a very lengthy study to do. keep in mind in observation, except during COVID, we develop very quick, but to help the population, this is, I believe this is one of the like a very uncommon and very perfect a perfect attempt to reduce the cut to save the population. So this is a very rare condition, but a typical study, the timeline is very long, and as I mentioned, it's also very costly. And I use, thanks for some references I use. So if maybe if this PowerPoint slides, if it is accessible to everybody, I will maybe I'll let them know to get these references. So this is a very good reference for the clinical trial paper, which actually describe more details about the clinical trial, how we should go, and what are all the advantage and disadvantage details of this trial. And I'm happy to introduce some of the information about the beginning of the clinical trial, and I will really go for if anybody have any question. Let's see. Yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yasmin. This has been excellent. Dear everyone, does anyone have any questions for Dr. Yasmin? Well, clinical trials are not very prevalent in Jordan, let's put it that way, and maybe it is, and the Middle Eastern population in general, it is underrepresented in clinical trials. And this is something to work on and to improve upon. And hopefully, this is, I think, one of the messages from this conference is that, to give different perspectives and different research designs. So hopefully the people attending will start engaging more and more in clinical trials. And especially we have a 70% of our audience, they're students, so they are the future. So this is some kind of work cut out for them to do. So thank you so much, Dr. Yasmin. Oh, there's a question. If you want to go through the chats, there is.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a question: how does one choose the sample size? Yes, so this is the sample size. Actually, as I mentioned earlier in the very beginning, the cartoons, the sample size are typically identify for the very phase 1 study. The sample size is very small, with very 10 to 20 patient, and then at first, and phase 2 it goes to 100 patients, and the clinical trial 1,000 patients. This is a typical standard, but we also design the study based on power study. Like, for example, if we do in 100 patient or a small group of patient, we run through the statistics to get the statistician decide how big should be a sample size to develop inference. For example, if we have a surgical technique to study, we do not have 1,000 patient, it might take years. So if we run the power through the statistical technique, we may end up with a smaller sample size to get the outcome we are looking for. So typically for a regular drug, standard sample size is defined in each phase, but for different types or to get a statistical confirmation, we need to run the power through the statistician to get the typical enough size for a sample to get an inference. So that's a very good, a very important question. Does anybody? Yes, the next is the slide. Yes, of course, I will share the slides. I will ask the authority to share my slides. I will send the slides. Thanks.
There is one more question. Can you please explain the difference between effect modification and confounding in clinical trials?
Yeah, so that's a also very important question. The confounding effect sometimes submerge the drug. So for example, if we find a drug in selecting the patient, we are as far we want to see the safetiness of the drug. So if we are selecting the patient for checking the pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, and the toxicity of the study, but we did not properly check the patient, the healthy population, we did not investigate. There might be some silent disease person who has some minor kidney problem or a minor liver problem. So when we are giving the drug to them, they are generating kind of a side effect of the drug or the slow metabolism or slow excretion, which actually is not a desired outcome of this drug. But since we are not properly identifying our samples, we are generating a confounding effect of this complication of the drug, which actually reduce the accessibility of this study or the successfulness of the study. This is, and then also confounding effect may be with different environment. Maybe we are trying to try a drug which may have kind of a in a population where the population tend to be eating very healthy, and then we are trying to see what happened to obesity drug on those population and compared to the population who are not having a healthy diet condition, trend. So this might have a confounding effect because the population who are managing their diet with very healthy way, we may not see the proper effect of these drug for weight loss. So these are some of the examples of confounding effect that might be, where you your variation, you increase more variation to the trial. So the minimizing the variation of the study population is very important part of the study, as I mentioned before.
Great. There's a couple of more questions in the chat if we have time for them.
Yeah, sure, thanks.
How would you know that you are dealing with type 1 error rather than a true effect?
Yeah, so for the type 1 error, where we mention that it gives a false positive, so these are actually part of the statistician to decide, because there is a analytic group who will analyze all the data from the getting from the patient's information to the outcome of the disease. So when we do see type 1 error, those can be shown by the analysis of the trial. For example, if we see very false positive or false negative type 1 or type 2 error, this study has to be stopped or redesigned, or sometimes it cannot be diagnosed very early. It shown at the very end. That's really not good. So this has to be evaluated by a very, as I mentioned, committee of the study group properly. So even the selecting of the samples will prevent type 1 error. Selecting of the bringing variability may increase the type 1 error also.
And one last question. Please, what is the control group when a trial is testing a drug for a disease that already has a drug used on in the field? Do we use a placebo or the existing drug?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, it's the intention of the study, what the study wants to do. So as I mentioned, there is in the placebo group, there is a type of placebo where you want to see a better condition of the patient compared to the current existing treatment. So here, the placebo group will not have a inert placebo drug. The placebo control group will have their standard of treatment as the control group, where we do not use inert placebo. Compare this group of patient with a new drug, which we are predicting to have a better life or better control of the disease may given. So this can be compared with the two treatment variables. One would be the patient are taking the standardized treatment in current conditions compared to the new treatment method. So these are not a typical inert placebo patient are getting.
Looks like that's it for questions from the chat.
Okay, thank you so much. And it was my pleasure to get some of the information regarding the very basic of the clinical trials. And it was, if I will definitely share the slides. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Yasmin. We're getting amazing feedback from the audience. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing your slides. I will make sure that all the participants receive them. We hope to see you in Jordan. We hope to continue this dialogue also. Been looking at some of your research, and maybe we'll have some conversation about it, and we'd love to see you in Jordan.
That would be excellent. Yeah, I know one of my friends lives there. I would be very happy to visit sometime there.
That's beautiful. Inshallah.
Inshallah.
We're working on that.
Inshallah.
So hopefully within the next year or two, we can have speakers come over and we can start initiating collaborative projects.
That will be great. Thank you. And it was my pleasure to be introduced to the community. And thanks to Dr. Ngwa for giving me the opportunity. And it is my pleasure to be with the Global Health. I am actually with this Global Health from 2016 when I started working with Dr. Ngwa. That is my pleasure. And for also some information, nowadays clinical trials are also moving to the population in Dubai. I heard because they are trying to get, because in Dubai the population is very diverse, so they try to get the stage 3 sometimes phase 2 or phase 3 trial in Dubai to get more variation of the population to see the outcome of the drug. This is a very, I just heard that that's a very important information for the Middle Eastern population to get the drug tested. Thank you.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, so I will be stop my sharing right now. Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much. Dr. Will, thank you so much as always. Thank you for everything. Thank you. It's beautiful to see people from all over the world coming together and collaborating to improve the health of everyone. So it's a pleasure and an honor to be with you. And it's been amazing, our wonderful speakers today. And thank you so much, Dr. Will. Thank you so much, Victoria, for helping us with all the logistics. Thank you so much. Looking forward to seeing everyone tomorrow, inshallah. So to continue this journey into the different parts of medical research.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Laila.
Thank you, everyone. Take care and God bless.
Thank you, everyone. Shall I end the Zoom now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you all so much. See you tomorrow.